What lies behind the roles of mother and father? Why are these images so deeply rooted in our conscious and unconscious minds? The archetypes of mother and father are not just roles or social functions. They are powerful symbols that shape not only our personality, but also how we build relationships with our children. In this video, we will delve into the psychology of archetypes to understand how these ancient images influence parenting, the expectations and fears we project onto our children. You will learn how archetypal models can both support a child's development and create invisible barriers, and what can be done to free yourself from limiting scenarios. This is a journey into the depths of the family soul. I invite you to reflect and open up new horizons of understanding yourself as a parent, and at the same time, help your children grow in harmony. The personal myth of the family, the unconscious scenario that we pass on to our children. Each family is not just a set of biological connections. It is a living organism nourished not only by love and care, but also by deep unconscious stories that we call the personal myth of the family. Carl Jung called this phenomenon the family unconscious, a complex set of ideas, beliefs, emotional experiences, and behavior patterns that are passed down from generation to generation. This myth is made up of words spoken at the family table, traditions observed on holidays, gestures, glances, and even silence. It is like an invisible thread that connects all family members, shaping how each of us perceives the world, ourselves, and others. For a child, this myth becomes a kind of map that guides them through life. But what happens if this myth contains a lot of pain, shame, unresolved conflicts, or unhealed wounds? Then the child inherits not only genes, but also emotional burdens that affect their self-esteem, choices, relationships, and life path. As Jung wrote, unconscious family scenarios can capture the personality, repeating themselves in the child's life in the form of the same mistakes and suffering. The task of parents is not just to pass on this myth, but also to be able to recognize it and rewrite it if necessary. It is important to understand that knowing the history of your family is not a sentence, but an opportunity. When we recognize the painful aspects of the family myth, we can take responsibility and change what we pass on. How can we rewrite the family myth? It is worth starting with an honest look at the past, not rejecting or idealizing it, but acknowledging it. Acknowledging pain and mistakes means giving ourselves the right to heal. It is important to create new family traditions that carry support, respect, and love, rather than fear and limitation. For a child, it's like getting a new compass that helps them not get lost in the maze of life's difficulties. A new myth is not a denial of the past, but an integration with it, an opportunity to learn from the experience of our ancestors without being their prisoners. For example, if there was a myth in the family that success comes only through sacrifice, you can create a new narrative. Success is possible through harmony and self-care. This changes the internal code that influences the child's behavior and choices. It is important to remember that a family myth is formed not only in words, but also in the emotional climate. Children are keenly aware of moods and attitudes, even if they are not spoken aloud. Therefore, it is important for parents to work on their own internal traumas and fears so as not to transfer them to their children. Ultimately, the personal family myth is a mirror of our unconscious. Understanding its structure and content helps parents and children reach a new level of mutual understanding and build relationships based not on repeating old scenarios, but on conscious choice and love. The shadow and parental projections, what we place on our children's shoulders. We have all heard about the unconscious, but Carl Gustav Jung went further and spoke about the shadow, that part of our psyche where we store everything we do not want to acknowledge in ourselves. Fears, unfulfilled ambitions, forbidden desires. The deeper we hide them, the louder they sound later, but not from within, but through other people. Most often, through our own children. Have you noticed how sometimes parents literally mold their children to fit their unfulfilled dreams? I didn't become a doctor, so you definitely will. Or vice versa. I didn't have enough discipline in my childhood, so you will grow up according to the rules. These words reflect not so much concern for the child's future as an attempt to fill an old hole in the soul. Projections are a psychological way of bringing out what causes us pain or shame inside, and the family is a convenient stage for such projections. The child becomes a screen onto which the parent transfers their fears, resentments, or complexes. The problem is that the child cannot sort them out and return them. They begin to live a life that is not their own. How does this manifest itself? For example, a parent is afraid of being weak and immediately evokes this fear in the child, demanding that they be strong, obedient, and perfect. Or a mother who, deep down, feels guilty, will control her daughter's every move, forbidding her even the slightest independence, so as not to accidentally repeat her own mistakes. One Jungian psychotherapist compared this to the shadow we cast when walking in the sunlight. The brighter the light, our ideal parental role, the longer and scarier the shadow. And if we don't see it, it breaks through into our parenting. What can be done? First of all, learn to notice where you end and where your child begins. For example, ask yourself a few questions. Is this his desire or mine? Am I angry with him now, or with my own youthful failure? Am I forbidding this because it is truly dangerous, or because I myself was afraid of it? An important practice is to deal with the shadow within yourself. Some people find this through journaling. They write down what particularly annoys them about their child. This often highlights what we do not recognize in ourselves. Another way is to have an honest conversation with your partner or a close friend who can remind you from the outside. You're not arguing with your son right now. You're arguing with your childhood. Another step is to stop involving your child in your internal wars. If you're arguing with your spouse, your child should not be your ally or judge. If you're tired or afraid, learn to talk about it with words, not prohibitions or shouting. After all, no one is immune to projections, but you can make them more conscious. Catch yourself when you want to accuse your child of something they are not. At that moment, you can choose a different reaction, talk, hug, explain. This way, the shadow becomes not a monster, but a guide. After all, as Jung said, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. A parent who works with their shadow stops passing it on to their children. They give their children back the right to be themselves, without the burden of other people's fears. Try today to notice where you are projecting and where you are really seeing your child. Perhaps this small act of honesty will be the beginning of a bigger conversation with yourself and with those you love. Symbols and family culture are a bridge that we build together. There is one important idea. A parent is not just a teacher or a provider. A parent is a conduit of meaning. Through words, customs, and traditions, we implant a symbolic world in our children that will help them stay on their feet for a long time to come. Carl Jung said that humans cannot exist without images and symbols, for it is they that connect our consciousness with the unconscious, with the depths of our lineage and culture. Think about it. What symbols do you pass on to your children? Maybe it's the warm family fairy tales that your grandmother used to tell, small rituals, blowing out candles on a cake, an old blanket under which you can hide from trouble. Even the habit of gathering around the table on Sundays is also a symbol, a living bridge between generations. When such images and traditions are alive, a child feels supported. They know they have roots. There is something they can always take with them, even if the family moves to different cities and countries. If these symbols are absent, or if they are diluted in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, the child grows up like a tree without soil. Outwardly, it may seem strong, but inwardly, it is unstable. It is also important for adults to remember this. After all, many parents themselves lost their symbols in childhood, when there was no tradition of gathering together or no one read bedtime stories. Then, when they become parents, they often face a void. What can I pass on if nothing was passed on to me? But the good news is that the symbolic fabric can be woven anew. Come up with your own family stories. Start a ritual that doesn't require a lot of expense. Joint walks on Sundays, tea evenings without phones, an album where you paste photos or notes together. Small things are of great importance. Jung wrote, "Where there are no myths, man dies spiritually." This is how it works in a family. Without shared meanings, a child quickly distances himself from his parents and loses a common language. And along with warm symbols, the feeling returns, I am part of something bigger. I'm not alone. How to strengthen family symbols. 1. Tell your child where you come from. Not only geographically, but also spiritually. What songs did your parents sing? What books did they love? 2. Start family traditions, even small ones. They don't work right away, but over time they become a source of support. 3. Listen to what stories and images are important to your child. Sometimes they're the ones who bring in new symbols, a favorite toy, book, or song. 4. Take care of family belongings, photographs, and letters. They're not dusty junk, but a living bridge that connects you. When a child grows up in a symbolic environment, they learn to see not only the superficial, but also the profound in the world. They overcome difficulties more easily because something warm and lasting lives in their memory. Your words, your stories, your evenings together. And if you haven't started yet, start today. Even one story told with love can become a talisman for your child for many years to come. The role of the father in the Jungian system, a strict guardian and wise guide. When we talk about family and upbringing, attention is often focused on the image of the mother, the source of warmth, care, and emotional security. However, the role of the father is no less important, and it occupies a special place in Jungian psychology. The archetype of the father is not only the image of a strict judge or dictator, as is sometimes mistakenly believed. It is, above all, a symbol of order, structure, and boundaries, which are necessary for the formation of the child's inner self. Carl Gustav Jung considered the archetype of the father to be the archetype of law, which helps the child navigate the chaos of the world. The father figure, in its ideal manifestation, is like a beacon and a support, giving confidence to go beyond the comfort of home, explore the unknown, and take responsibility for one's own life. This archetype helps to build the framework in which personality develops. Without structure, true freedom is impossible. The psychological mechanisms here are simple but profound. When a father embodies the archetype of a wise mentor, a child feels protected and can allow themselves to explore the world with confidence. Strict but fair boundaries form a sense of responsibility, teach impulse control and self-discipline. This allows the child to grow into an independent personality capable of making decisions. However, if the father becomes only a harsh jailer, strict and heartless, then the archetype transforms into a tyrant, and instead of protection, fear and protest arise. The child's internal image of the father becomes a source of anxiety or aggression. Similarly, if the father is absent or emotionally unavailable, a void forms in the psyche, a lack of support that prevents the child from building healthy relationships with the world. Jungian psychology emphasizes that a man must integrate the image of the father within himself, consciously take responsibility for his life, and role as a guide for the next generation. For the mother, it is important to understand and respect this process, allowing the child to explore the world with the support of the father, without replacing him with her own fears and control. A metaphor that helps to visualize this role. The father is an ancient oak tree, whose roots go deep into the ground and whose branches reach high into the sky. Its strength and stability create space for growth and development around it. If the oak tree is flexible and alive, it does not break in the wind, but if it is dry and rigid, it risks falling. For modern parents, this means not only controlling and punishing, but being a guide who helps the child find their own way. Support does not always come in the form of kind words. Sometimes it comes in the form of a confident gaze, the opportunity to make mistakes, and a safe boundary of responsibility. Tips for fathers and mothers who want to harmonize this archetype in the family. 1. Allow your child to make mistakes. This is the foundation for independence. 2. Demonstrate stability and calmness in difficult situations. 3. Discuss values and rules with your child, explaining their meaning. 4. Do not replace the role of the father with your anxiety. Give a child space to grow up. 5. Together with the mother, create a balance between warmth and structure. The role of the father is not so much to command as to lead, not so much to control as to support in the exploration of the world. This is the path of maturity and trust that strengthens the generation and forms the foundation for the future. How not to confuse an archetype with a real person. When we talk about the archetypes of mother and father, it is easy to fall into the trap of confusing them with specific people, our parents, spouses, or even ourselves. An archetype is a universal image, a symbol that exists in the collective unconscious, and it is not identical to a real person. Understanding this difference is extremely important in order to build healthy relationships and not unconsciously inherit the unconscious scenarios of the past. An archetype is not a person, but rather an energetic image or set of expectations, roles, and feelings that are culturally and psychologically embedded in our consciousness. For example, the mother archetype includes the idea of care, protection, nourishment, and unconditional love, while the father archetype includes the principle of authority, order, boundaries, and support for development. However, in real life, the specific person who plays these roles is always a mixture of archetype and individuality, with their own mistakes, weaknesses, and peculiarities. The problem arises when we unconsciously place expectations on our loved ones that are dictated by archetypal images, instead of seeing them as they are. This can lead to disappointment, misunderstanding, and conflict. A parent who tries to be a father in the strict archetypal sense may not take into account their child's personal qualities and their own limitations. A child who expects unconditional support from their mother may not notice that their real mother is also a person with her own fears and mistakes. Carl Jung said that archetypes are like shadows projected onto the real world. And if we are not aware of this projection, we can become confused in our feelings and relationships. It is important to develop the ability to see the real person behind the archetype with their personal history, needs, and possibilities. This means learning to separate the universal symbol from the individual personality and accepting them in their uniqueness. To avoid confusion, it is helpful to ask yourself questions such as, what do I expect from this person? Is it realistic? Can I accept them as they are, rather than how I want them to be? It is important to work on awareness and empathy, to learn to listen and see others without distortion. For example, if a father seems too strict, it is worth considering. Is this a manifestation of the father archetype as a bearer of order and discipline, or are these real personal traits that can be understood and accepted? If your mother seems overly caring or conversely distant, how is this related to the mother archetype and what is really behind it? When we learn to separate the archetype from the personality, we gain the freedom to build relationships without illusions and disappointments, to accept others and ourselves as we are. This is the path to true mutual understanding and inner harmony in the family. Thus, archetypes serve as a guide for us, but they do not dictate who a person should be. It is important to remember that a real person is always more complex and richer than any symbol. Awareness of this difference is the key to deep and healthy relationships between parents and children. Transforming a negative archetype is like stopping living according to someone else's script. Sometimes a person carries the image of a parent who caused them pain for years, and this image continues to influence them even if the person themselves is no longer around or alive. In Jungian psychology, such images are called archetypes. They are woven so deeply into our subconscious that they begin to control our reactions, choices, and even how we build relationships with our own children. Think about how many people say that as children they only heard shouting or harsh words, and now, as adults, they suddenly find themselves shouting in the same way, only now at themselves or their children. It's like an old script that plays over and over again. Jung wrote, "We are not aware of these archetypes until we begin to talk to them. This means that the first step toward liberation is to see this image. For example, behind anger there may be the archetype of the harsh father or strict mother. Behind guilt, there may be the all-knowing critic. They're like an inner mask through which we look at the child. It is important to understand that you are not this archetype. You are more than that. What helps to unravel this destructive scenario? First of all, honesty with yourself. Realize that this image once protected you. The child inside you believed that if you obeyed or justified yourself, at least you would not be abandoned. But now you are older, and you have the right to rewrite these rules. How to work with a negative archetype. 1. Awareness. Write down what exactly hurt or frightened you in your parent. What of this do you notice in yourself now? 2. Forgiveness and letting go. This does not mean justifying evil. It means not carrying it into the new day. "I don't have to continue this pain" is a powerful phrase to start with. 3. Setting boundaries. If your parent is still around and their words still hurt, learn to say no. This is not rebellion. It is maturity. 4. A new image. Think about what kind of parent you want to be. What qualities do you want to pass on to your child? What archetype will they remember you as? 5. Support. Sometimes it is difficult to change deep-rooted images on your own. Therapy, books on analytical psychology, and support groups can help with this. One mother recounted how, at the most difficult moment, she literally imagined putting on a new mask, not that of a strict mother, but that of an ally. At first, it seemed like a game, but gradually the new reactions took hold. Instead of shouting, a pause. Instead of criticism, a question. This is how a new family line is formed, not out of pain, but out of care. We do not choose the archetypes we grow up with, but we can choose which ones we leave to our children. Stop living according to someone else's script. Break the chain that runs through generations. Let your child remember you not as a shout, but as a safe haven. What script do you want to break? Tell us about it in the comments. Perhaps your path will be a clue for those who are just beginning to break their old chains. And remember, we are not obliged to carry the burden of other people's archetypes on our shoulders. Parenting is not a role with a strict script, but a living story. In it, you can always rewrite the ending. Friends, I believe that conscious parents raise not only their children, but also themselves. And this path is worthy of respect. How do you feel about the images of mother and father within yourself? Is there anything you would like to leave in the past? Share in the comments. Your stories can support others. Subscribe to the channel if this topic resonates with you. There are many more sincere conversations ahead. Thank you for being here.